reset the clock. TrueEmpiricism, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
I want you guys to pay attention to the title of the debate. The title of the debate isn't necessarily to talk about scientific models, but to see what best explains or best accounts for the systems that you find inside of nature. No. Hold on a second. I'm going to respond to that. The topic tonight is what best accounts for the systems that are inside of nature. The argument that I presented for that was the brain and the nervous system. That wasn't actually approached at all in this discussion. He went on talking about the ATP synthase, which wasn't talked about at all. Now let's reread that title, what best accounts for the systems that are in nature. The topic of the debate wasn't which is a better model for intelligence or for the systems inside of nature, but what best accounts. Okay, well, he went about talking about the genes of the hexameric proteins, and all he did was go back to the first accusation that I made towards him was all it's coming down was to pareidolia. He's just pattern seeking. Of course, if he understands the genes and the sequences of how DNA works, it's going to be similar sequences because they're similar in stature and in operation. But if he's going to try to say that they came from one another, he's going to have to actually show the mechanisms of evolution producing those differences, not pointing out similarities in these different archaea, bacteria, prokaryotic cells, and eukaryotic cells, and whatever supposedly more simplistic organisms that went about some sort of metabolic pathway differently, and just comparing them and lining them up. You see, we hear a lot of bold assertions that he can show that they've come from one another, but we haven't seen him demonstrate any of that. All he's doing is saying these different organisms have come from one another. The problem with what he's trying to say with how it doesn't disprove evolution, this failed prediction doesn't disprove evolution, is the exact problem that evolution has. One of the reasons why Karl Popper came up with this idea of falsifiability was to try to separate what some of the former scientists were doing, the mistake of trying to just confirm their own idea and view. If you cannot falsify this idea or theory, if it's continuously getting falsified and the predictions are continuously failing, you just say, well, evolution can do it another way. Evolution just did it. It's nothing more than evolution of the gaps. It's not an evolution. It's not a scientific model because you don't have any, it can't be falsified. And he keeps on saying that, well, the evolutionary theory can account for it, but where are the mechanisms to show these differences? Telling me that these genes have similar sequences to one another isn't a demonstration that the mechanisms of evolution can actually account for these differences to produce these anatomical features that we're talking about. Now, actually I should say that he's talking about it because he's the one mentioning the ATP synthase. And again, if we go back to the stickleback fish, for example, that's not the only fail with it. At every single dimension, it would appear that it would be closely related to the three-spined stickleback fish. But there's also another gene that's found in another chromosome that determines sex. Well, what's a big problem there? According to the evolutionary theory, that if organisms are closely related, whether it be mammals, X amount of millions of years ago, and they're closely related, they should have the same gene determination for sex. But it failed. It was wrong. So there's a lot of failed predictions here. It's, as I was trying to say before, that it's like somebody claiming that they're a psychic and get it right the first time, the prediction that it's going to land on tails, but randomly you're beginning these failed predictions as well. Predictions are not important if you cannot show that the predictions can account for the mechanisms. A prediction that's important is if you say, well, these mechanisms, horizontal gene transfer, vertical gene transfer, gene duplication, can accumulate and then build this structure or build the topic that we're supposed to be on that I actually mentioned here tonight, the nervous system and the brain. That hasn't been touched on, and I hope that I hear some responses to that. So just in closing, we do not see any mechanisms of evolution accounting for the systems inside of nature. We do see intelligent agents producing these systems inside of nature, like coded information or computer programs, right? To say that evolutionary theory can account for those systems that are inside of nature, he's got to show the mechanisms of evolution to produce those things, not just assert that they've produced those things. And to say that we have to see the intelligence actually making these things inside of nature with our own eyes, like we had to be there to see it happen, is a misunderstanding in science. So that's it. Hopefully you guys understand the points here is cause and effect, not suspect predictions.
Numerous times that these mechanisms don't explain things, yet these mechanisms do explain things. Mutations do explain changes in the genes. Copying errors do explain changes in the genes. We have numerous studies that show these precursors for modern evolution systems, modern molecular systems.
He started mentioning again where we can show these differences, these changes. He's not showing them. The only example he used was the hexameric proteins, and because they have similar sequences of genes, this is supposed to show that they came from one another. And all these patterns that he's supposedly claiming can demonstrate the changes leading up to it is nothing more than what, like I said before, pareidolia. He's not demonstrating that they came from one another, just looking at already existing features and already existing creatures and assuming that one slowly diverged from another because of their similarities. Similarities is important right now. Anybody can pattern things like that and point out similarities, but using a mechanism to demonstrate causality, cause and effect, to show that the differences can actually occur is what's actually important right here.